Actually a superpower, the fact that you can like see something, it doesn't move you, and then you seek to make it move you.
If you subscribe to the idea that most things just aren't really that original, right? Like, I didn't invent feeding hungry people. If you see a way to make something better and to tell a story that helps other people resonate with it or connect with it, make it easy for people to kind of participate, then through the lens of this endeavor, you're able to make exponential impact and kind of compound on the work that other people are already doing. So I was raised by a single mother.
Was it your mother or some other single mother?
No, I say it's my single mother. I was an only child, and my earliest memories were her starting a business out of our one-bedroom apartment. Some people's parents are doctors or lawyers or mechanic or whatever. That's what you see. That's what your orientation of the world is. So mine was somebody who had no formal education. We had to figure out, it was either I'm going to work these 3 minimum wage jobs and I got to raise this kid, or I'm going to try to figure some shit out.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Innovation Crush Masters of Craft. How are you doing today, Ajay Relan?
I think I'm doing okay.
I think you're doing okay too.
Yeah.
You're having a good hair day. Even though you doubted it.
It rained. I wasn't expecting it to rain, but it's been raining a lot in LA lately.
Could get you a bucket hat.
But then if I have bucket hat, then I'd have bucket hat head.
True.
Yeah.
All right, problem solved. When I Google you, the first thing that comes up is an investor, entrepreneur, and community builder, which is not always synonymous in the venture capital, VC, all the things that you do. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the community building piece, and then we'll get into all the other nosy stuff.
That's a great question. I'd say, over the past decade, I've been a lot more intentional around it. I'd say the majority of the things that I get credit for contributing to or creating, it all kind of comes back to bringing people together for the right reasons. And when I think back on my life, that's always kind of been my favorite thing to do. But I guess more formally, it started with my career in the restaurant business. I've been in the hospitality industry now for a little over a decade. Opened my first restaurant with some partners. And just really loved kind of bringing people together. It started around sports, and then kind of around that time I started using the space to bring people together after I was prescribed by a therapist to go out and start volunteering as a way to deal with some, personal, professional transitions that I was just kind of going through, and then didn't really see the connection towards like community work or community service or giving back and mental health and how it kind of improves the quality of that, and ended up starting an organization that was founded around this idea of solving food insecurity and creating awareness around homelessness starting in LA, and then that became its own thing that kind of grew globally, but it kind of got me thinking more around how to kind of implement more things like that with that ethos into everything that I did, whether it was entrepreneurially or through investing, which at the time didn't really make sense, but most things don't until you do them and look back on them.
You're referring to Hashtag Lunchbag.
I am.
And I did not know that was a result of therapy,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting. Tell us about Hashtag Lunchbag and how it felt to first launching it, and then here we are almost 10 years later. You just did a 10-year anniversary. Like what was that initial thing? Because I think some of these like emotional and mental transitions can be uncomfortable at first. And then suddenly you're like, oh, this is actually really, and Hashtag Lunchbag is dope, but I'll let you tell.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, really, really high level. I'd say back in 2012, I had a lot of change in my life, a lot of loss, unexpected loss, like some expected loss, just things that were kind of shifting. I was in my late 20s. I think there's just a thing that happens in your late 20s. If you have any type of ambition that kind of creates a level of discomfort that kind of causes you to seek a little bit more across the spectrum. So I was pretty proactive around getting help or, talking to a therapist, which I think everybody could benefit from. And then, I was kind of got hit with the D word. He was like, I think you're suffering from depression, which wasn't a surprise for me because everybody in my family's depressed and everybody in my family's on, antidepressants, and they're still not doing that great. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not surprised that that's something that I kind of have to deal with, but I'd be down to figure out another way to deal with it. And, after you kind of get hit with you should go out and meditate, which I eventually started doing, which was great. Maybe if you tried journaling, I really haven't gotten into that, but when I do find time to write my thoughts, it works out. And the volunteering thing I thought was a little silly. because I'd gone to Catholic school, I had mandatory community service. I didn't necessarily see the connection.
Right.
Probably not in my youth, because you don't really know why you're doing it. You're just doing it because you have to finish an
assignment. They told me to.
Yeah, and then it was when I finally got around to it, was a friend of mine had invited me to join her and a group of her friends to go to a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving, which is like this designated day of giving downtown, right off of Skid Row, which I was like, great, this is on my to-do list. I'm like a high-functioning, depressed person. Nobody really knows. I got it all figured out or covered up. And I went, and the experience was kind of, it was like well-intentioned, but it was not really that fulfilling or rewarding. And I was still kind of in my own like head around it. And then Christmas, I woke up and it's day 2 of 2, designated day of giving, where I was guilty of this as well, where you're starting to think about doing something outside of yourself. And I had procrastinated, and I was with a group of my friends, and we hadn't really lined up an opportunity, so we just went to our local grocery store, and we're like, there's enough need in our local neighborhood, and living in West Hollywood at the time, so I'm like, let's just feed 100 people. And made it fun, second nature, shared it on social media. We're like listening to DMX Christmas carols, watching the Lakers beat the Knicks,
right.
Drinking some champagne, invited some friends over. It kind of turned it into a party situation. And then, didn't really think anything of it, didn't necessarily share my personal desire to go out and do something like that, but got enough of a positive feedback from friends and followers that we decided to make it a thing that we did the following month out of our house, and then just committed to doing it as a monthly thing. Ended up growing it to the parlor, which we spent a lot of time at, and it became a thing that we just started doing once a month. And every month after the event, we just checked the hashtag, and then we started seeing other people in other cities doing it. People that we hadn't seen in forever, people that we had never met, and that's the beauty of the internet, right? You don't really know who's watching and who's taking inspiration from what you're doing. A lot of us share what we eat or what we're wearing or where we're going, all the highlights, but nobody's really...
Look at all this drip.
Yeah, so, it's cool. And then, pretty quickly you kind of realize, like, this has really not a whole ton to do with the food or the act. It's more about the experience that we created for people to kind of come to their own conclusion of why we're all here. And I kind of adopted that into everything else.
Let's talk about the numbers, because I just want to, the impact you've made collectively with Hashtag Lunchbag. Yeah. How's that quantified?
Yeah, so day 1 was Christmas 2012. Bought enough food to feed 100 people for $136.32 from the local Ralph's. That following month, we fed 200 people. About 10 people showed up to my house, to our apartment. Following month is when we started doing it out of the restaurant. Jumped up to about 1,500 meals. 100 people showed up for that. And then we're about 40 cities in that first 9 months. There's been Hashtag Lunchbag events in over 150 cities all over the world. We just crossed the 1,000,000th meal all through a hashtag. So at the end of the day, it's just a really good marketing campaign, right? We didn't go out in all these cities and set up all this infrastructure, but we've done some really cool partnerships. Like, we helped launch Wells Fargo's mobile banking app because they wanted to tell a story about how millennials get
they were
things done.
hyper local
that
at
was
the time.
Really cool.
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. And then Warriors, Laker fan here, but the Warriors, when they won the 2015 championship, did a big Hashtag Lunchbag at the Oakland Convention Center with all of its season tickets holders. So it's cool.
And I love these moments because it's like, to me, those are like the Ajay Relan, you can't copy that. And I remember, you're one of those people, we see each other every couple of years and for a stint of time. And then, but I remember it's like, you're like, oh, I did a rap video with Snoop. And I was like, what? It's like, what are you talking about? And then you showed it to me. It was like, you are rapping.
One and done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was one take?
There was a one that was
you didn't put out an album,
my career. And the functionality of that was to serve as like a visual guide to supplement how to do your own Hashtag Lunchbag. Yeah.
There's something in that. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and you talked about how you get bored easily, which cut to the beginning of this story, right? Going to feed the homeless on Thanksgiving, right? And I'm gonna do my own thing, and I don't know. Just tell me, walk me through that mechanic in you, because I feel like it's actually a superpower. The fact that you can see something, it doesn't move you, and then you seek to make it move you, right? Yeah. Forgive me if I'm paraphrasing, but
no, that's a great question. I think, if you subscribe to the idea that most things just aren't really that original, right? Like, I didn't invent feeding hungry people. Like Jesus was turning water into wine and shit, right? There's, and then like I think the thing that was super. I mean, for any of these things, like whether it's the work that I'm doing in the investing landscape, which we can talk about, or the hospitality, these are all things that exist. It's just like if you see a way to make something better and to tell a story that helps other people resonate with it or connect with it and make it easy for people to kind of participate, then through the lens of this endeavor, you're able to make exponential impact and kind of compound on the work that other people are already doing. So I think we all have the opportunity to look at things through our lens, trust ourselves that our lived experience can kind of contribute to something. It could be better, but like that doesn't mean the old thing wasn't good. It's just like now you have the ability to appeal to a completely different group of people. And in this case, it's just teaching people how to think differently about their role in the world. And that makes me feel good, right? Like my selfish ulterior motive was just to feel better about some things that I've gone through. And it kind of led me to my own conclusion that if there's 170 religions in the world, they only have one thing in common. And it's just like help other people and you'll feel better. Right? Yeah. It's like you're feeling down, lift somebody else up. I didn't necessarily quit my entire life to go and, live a life of service. In my own way I have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you can't go out and pursue your other wildest dreams too.
The operative word that comes to mind for me is joy. And even working with my therapist, we were talking about that concept of like actually creating it for yourself first and then almost like giving it to people or expressing it through a certain thing. Tell us about Sloss & Co. and then tell us what brings joy to you in doing what you do.
Oh man, Sloss & Co. is so at its core we're an early stage, pre-seed, seed stage venture capital firm rooted in this idea of economic inclusion. So about a decade ago, I had the opportunity to start angel investing alongside some friends. Some really close friends that I've been close with for a while. One of them was Nas, and and his manager Anthony, they're doing their thing in the entertainment business, very thoughtful and early as in most things, and we've seen what they've been able to do over the past decade, but had the ability to kind of enter into this world and look at what was kind of on the horizon and what was next and how technology had the ability to disrupt our future. And those efforts evolved into an early stage or into a fund that we started called Queensbridge Ventures Partners, which was named after the housing projects where he grew up. And for me it was really a learning experience. Didn't really know much, and I was just kind of grateful to be there, and felt honored that my taste could have been could contribute my point of view and my perspective into some of the things that we got to invest in early with some awesome people. But yeah, I never really. I like building stuff, like less about like here's some money and I'll watch you from the side. So it was a fantastic experience. We got in some incredible companies, but then as I started continuing down my journey and became more mission oriented and still figuring out what that meant, I'd say in 2019, a good friend of mine that I've known since high school, a guy named Austin, we both grew up right down the street, right in South LA together. It was rare he very in a different path, entered into venture capital and went to B school to study it, went and got a job at a firm and worked his way up and built his own kind of reputation and skill set and knowledge in the space. And the thing that we would always kind of talk about, growing up where we grew up, not a lot of people knew what that was. And the exposure and the thing that we always talked about was there was such a huge opportunity to invest in people that grew up in the community that we grew up in, that if they knew that this asset class existed, that somebody would hand you, $500,000, $1 million to go work on an idea and go build out the scaffolding and change the trajectory of not only your life but the world based on how big you can make it. We thought that was something that was interesting. So Slosson was kind of the natural progression of that, and we had an interesting year. We started in early 2020. Our mission was, not on the top of mind for a lot of people. Thought it was kind of like a noble cause, and then all it takes is like one person in the right position to kind of believe in what you're doing, and then the perfect storm around a global pandemic, the unfortunate events around what happened with George Floyd, and it became all of a sudden what we were talking about became top of mind for a lot of people. So yeah, at our core, we're a pre-seed and seed stage fund. No quota or anything around diversity, but just investing in founders that are, with the demographic that's more representative of the U.S. population. We focus on the U.S. So yeah.
What were you doing before Queensbridge? Because your LinkedIn stops at Queensbridge, right? And just put Queensbridge in perspective, I think two sort of major wins that I know of. Ring was one, as it was Pluto TV, which I was in the starting team up. So thank you. But what was AJ do? I don't know. What were your aspirations as a kid? And this seems to have come out of nowhere to some degree.
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that part out. But I guess my earliest memories were, I was born in Detroit. As you know, I don't claim it. But
we still give you a card.
I entered the world in Detroit. My earliest memories were here, and I was raised by a single mother. And my earliest memories were her.
Was it your mother or some other single mother?
I say it's my single mother. I was an only child, and my earliest memories were her starting a business out of our one-bedroom apartment in Inglewood. So, some people's parents are doctors or lawyers or mechanic or whatever. That's what you see. That's what your orientation of the world is. So, mine was somebody who had no formal education, who had to figure out, it was either I'm going to work these 3 minimum wage jobs and I got to raise this kid, or I'm going to try to figure some shit out. And I helped her figure shit out from my earliest memories. I remember riding my bike when I was 5 or 6 years old to the bank to make deposits, to printing labels and shrink wrapping tapes and things like that. So I think entrepreneurship was always kind of something that, and then I just liked selling shit. I was a kid selling candy out of his locker. I had a brief stint selling weed out of my carpool ring for a week, and that didn't work out very well. And then just really enjoyed creating value for people through things that I could, earn a profit on. But that didn't necessarily lend itself to, when I went to school, I majored in business, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do after. So, I can be a little impulsive. I started my first business out of undergrad, and it was not sexy. I was servicing production companies and movie studios with equipment rentals. A lot of the stuff that we're looking at here, and I was just kind of
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
AJ likes it.
But no, all of this got cheaper and kind of put me out of business. But and then I worked on a startup that was focused on bringing stereoscopic 3D into the home. It's when all the TV manufacturers are 3D, and then ESPN is we got a 24-hour 3D network, and then nobody wanted it because wearing glasses at home is weird. And I thought that, but I thought they were smarter than I was. So
Isn't that weird? I think instinct is a thing, right? Because it's there's a lot of waves that come, and you're I don't know. Yeah. Same thing with VR. I remember feeling like the industry was just talking to itself about VR. And I was at one point there were more VR companies than there were people who were using it. Yeah. And I remember I gave a talk at the NEA. And I was my next slide was on VR, and I was how many people have you done a VR experience? 1,500 people, 3 people raise their hand. I was okay, this is it's different. This, the idea of critical mass is not always what we think it is. And I like this kind of unsexy part of it, or not going after the shiny objects, especially in an era where we're talking about artificial intelligence and Web3 and metaverse and NFT. There's all these industry buzzwords, but when I look at the Slauson & Co. Portfolio, it's bread and butter businesses. How do you make your selections, and maybe give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, so when we think about economic inclusion, and we think about what that means more broadly. So it's broken up into 2 different sectors. So one is, we define it as SMB tech. So not investing in small businesses, but investing in the tools and the technologies to support the next generation of small business owners. I go back to the story of my mother. This is an uneducated immigrant woman with no formal training in the path that she started to go. She just, saw a window and, slowly kind of inched her way up to build out her capacity. But when I think about some of the things that she had to do and a lot of the inefficiencies that, quite frankly, a lot of the older generation of small business owners, there's a lot of pen and paper. And then a big trend that we saw was
just put this in perspective. This is a video business.
Yeah.
So
but it's also interesting. You start to see there's this big shift happening. in a legacy transfer happening from these small business owners to millennials, mostly like the next generation. These are people who started businesses that are, retiring and handing to their sons and daughters, and they're not going to be, pen and papering. They're going to want to use technology the same way they do in their everyday life. So, and then as how we connect that to our mission is, the way we see it, 50 years from now, we're either all working for Amazon or a small business is still going to be the backbone of America, and we'll kind of continue to push innovation. And then the other category where we focus is a little bit more broad, but we define it as culturally aligned consumer tech-enabled products and services. So products and services whose values are, can you spell that?
THAT.
Okay. So products and services that are more aligned with the values of the customers that they serve. So I think, last decade we've seen a lot of products that have achieved a lot of critical mass, but may not necessarily have had business models that were aligned with the values of their customers. But then we also see, large shifts in the population, the demographics of the population, and that they don't necessarily have products and services that speak directly to them. So.
When you're talking to marginalized founders, and imagine like in addition to capital and operational assistance, there's also just like conversational, like I need perspective. Mm-hmm. Walk me through that process, or like what that piece of the business is like, just to have a human to human conversation with somebody about what they're building and what they're up against and what the opportunities are and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so you going into it, you have to believe that, like, a core belief for us is your lived experience is your competitive advantage. So, this isn't just giving people a look because they come from a marginalized community. It's like, no, you're dope and you've done dope shit and you've been successful in whatever path that you've chosen, and now you're kind of entering into this world where, like, wow, there's this massive problem that we're more than likely a novice on, that we're looking for them to kind of educate us, and we get to see how they think and talk about the world and what big problem that they're trying to solve, because at the end of the day we're taking big swings and hoping for big outcomes. So when we meet somebody that comes from a community that just historically hasn't gotten the funding or isn't connected to your Ivy League or Stanford ecosystem, or was an early employee at a big tech company, there's a little bit of a learning curve and more of a confidence curve too, right? It's like, how do we think about understanding, once we gain the confidence that they know what they're talking about and that they're uniquely qualified to figure it out. Again, we invest in the early stage, so we're comfortable with things changing, but how do we really build the scaffolding and, what is it that we can do based on the experience that we've had investing, building companies, building communities, and, and then recognizing patterns that we could contribute, like make a contribution to improve the outcomes and of their chances of success. We really position ourselves somewhere between a coach and a cheerleader, but we've also been super grateful to have like a network of people that believe in us and what we're doing, and like have offered to like lend their knowledge and their expertise and their networks, as long as we connect them at very specific. It's
interesting because I met a guy, shout out to Roger Romaine.
Cool name,
right?
Really cool name.
Cool guy. And when initial conversation, he's like, I don't want to be king, I'm a king maker. And he's proven that time and time over and over again as a manager or as a business operator, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like there's an essence of that, right? And what you do is like, I'm going to help give rise to this class of entrepreneurs. And, I look at the bookend of you being connected to the Nas's of the world, the Issa Raes of the world, and, Hilltop as far as the coffee business goes. Where do you see your personal role and personal mission? Like, the company's thing is one thing, like, where does the AJ-ness of it come up?
It's something that I struggle with actually kind of describing, but like the old party question, what do you do? Like the answer that I've piloted for a while now that I think I'm going to roll with is like, I feed people is the way that I view my role. Like whether it's in the hospitality business, you just mentioned Hilltop, we feed people quality experience, but we actually feed people food as a business model.
And pretty delicious food.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed it quite a few times.
Whether it's in the nonprofit philanthropy space through programs like Hashtag Lunchbag, which have now evolved into other things. We've started off feeding people that didn't necessarily know where their next meal was coming from, and then stumbling on the fact that the people that are providing the meals were feeding their own humanity. And now in this new role at Slauson, we're, feeding people capital, and we're feeding people resources and perspective and, connections to build big businesses fast. So, I mean, when I think about the thing that brings me the most joy is just bringing people from different walks of life that you would never imagine could ever connect or have something in common together for the right reasons to kind of create some type of outlier outcome.
In that mission of feeding people, I think about where I think it was the first Hilltop is in Inglewood. Is it the first one?
Slauson.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Where was the second one?
Inglewood.
Where's the third one?
Eagle Rock.
Didn't the one downtown?
The fourth one, yeah.
God, man, you're on a roll.
We just opened one downtown. Yep.
And what span of time? This is like a couple of years.
So we launched Hilltop for all the listeners is kind of if it's our first sports bar and Hashtag Lunchbag had a baby, the way I describe it is it would be Hilltop Coffee and Kitchen. So Hilltop, we opened the first one in summer of 2018. It's a coffee shop. It's right down the street from where I grew up, where my partners grew up. And the area that has historically had, some great, legacy businesses, mom and pop shops, and but mostly fast food stores. And we wanted to build something that was a quality offering for the community, that had a mission orientation around, hiring people from the local community, teaching leadership and entrepreneurship through entry-level employment, and then for me personally, it was just having a space in the community where people could come and be creative or work on their entrepreneurial, do coffee shop shit, and not have to drive 45 minutes to Venice or downtown or West Hollywood to go do coffee shop shit, which is beautiful. And even the name is just kind of centered around this idea of like we're all climbing something, right? Like, and then once you you're looking at this hilltop, you achieve this goal, you realize that there's a higher hill that you want to climb. Yeah. So it kind of promotes this idea is that there's really no destination, it's only milestones.
There's no limit.
And we were able to attract some really cool people to join that mission out of the gate, so that was cool.
Like who?
I mean, one of our partners is our girl Issa Rae. She has she had a show on HBO called Insecure. It was set in South LA specifically. She lives in the neighborhood. She's from there. Nobody really represents like that idea. And when we met her, she even said like, I was like, what would you be doing if you weren't becoming, taking over Hollywood? She's like, I'd probably be in a coffee shop doing coffee shop shit. I'm like, well, you should be in a coffee shop. And we made it make sense, and we ended up announcing our partnership when we opened our second flagship location in late 2019, right before the pandemic. So good times.
Speaking of pandemic, the metaphor I was just thinking of in my head, because you've been dropping a lot of metaphors. I was like, you're like a virus, but a good one. Yeah. See, I'm gonna turn around. Okay. Because the reason I'm thinking about that, because I think about where that Hilltop location is that I try to refer to as the whatever number it is. But in that complex, you're starting to take over other spaces. You're gonna create pop-up spots for some of the other brands and companies that you've created. It's like just a slow burn and a slow injection. And then I wrote down something from one of you guys' Instagram posts, which is creating systemic change isn't easy. And in that post, there was a video of Austin talking to his son about what he was like, who's probably like 5 or 4 in the
seven.
5. I'm getting them all wrong today. He looks so young for his age, but he's like, what do you want to be? I want to be an artist. And then Austin asks him what does he know what an entrepreneur, what an investor is, or what a venture capitalist is. So when I read this, creating systemic change isn't easy, and you're taking these like slow and deliberate but effective steps. Like, what is the thesis or the theme or the process by which you're approaching
Man,
this?
That's such a good question. I mean, I think that we live in this era where everybody wants to see fast results. I mean, even being in the venture capital industry, our job is to make things happen fast. But then kind of balancing that out with, our vision for the world. Austin is very well accomplished in his own right, from, his philanthropic things and creating more equity and inclusion, specifically in the LA technology ecosystem, which it perfectly kind of complements. We care about the same things, we just go about it in a different way. And when we kind of think about the mountain that we're kind of climbing, and when we think about, this country and all of the great things about it, but then also, like the history that's not necessarily our brightest spots, I think we can all kind of agree what got us here in a relatively short period of time. It's only been a couple hundred years. And it's like we kind of understand this idea of what makes this country great, but then also like, and how far we've come, but how far we actually have to go. And And for us, I think we look at everything through the lens of what could be. And we, going back to the idea of like, how do I view myself? Like, my favorite thing to do is kind of tell stories and figure out ways to to engage other people and enroll other people that are, quite frankly, much more influential and have way more resources than we have to believe in what we believe and make it easy for them to kind of participate. So the back part of what you said, creating systemic change isn't easy. It takes a village. And when I think about the and co part of Slauson & Co., we're very grateful for the people that have entrusted us with their capital, with their relationships, with their resources, and believing in us, because we know that this is something that's going to take a while, and we want to do as good of a job as we can building a brand that resonates with people, that just a wider variety of the population that just hasn't necessarily felt seen or acknowledged or given the resources that they need to go out and have their perspective represented in the market. And a small subset of those could be the next Twitter or Google, maybe not Twitter, Google or
old Twitter,
whatever. Yeah, old Twitter. Yeah. What Twitter was supposed to be. Whoops.
All right.
Great platform. Yeah.
Transitioning.
Inflammatory tweet.
Inflammatory. Which is okay. I won't dive too deeply into it, but there's a duality to you. You can't grow up how you grew up, and sit here with Jay-Z legs. Remember Jay-Z had his legs crossed and that trended. No, do it. I had mine too. I was trying to copy it.
Okay, cool.
But I just the word balance strikes me. Just in the number of things you have your hands in, and like obviously there's teams of people that are assisting, but like just the intellectual and the emotional capacity to balance all these things. What is that experience like for you?
Oh man, this shit is hard. I was just telling Brittany on our team the other day. I'm like, man, I get a lot of credit for shit that like I don't deserve the credit for, and like to your point, it's people. Like we are very fortunate to have the caliber of people that first and foremost give a shit about the same shit that we give a shit about, or give a shit about the same shit.
I think that worked.
There was too many words. That could have been more breath.
We set it to a beat when
it could have been.
It'll be dope.
But like, it all comes down to people, and I think that really starts with to our credit, for all of these endeavors to have a vision, but then also to have to be conditioned to keep going, which is the hardest part. It's like none of this shit is pretty. Innovation's not pretty. All the things that most people see are on the surface is what the general population can appreciate and give you credit for, but real ones know that it's not easy. It's not pretty.
You're seeing the results of trial and error, and
lots of
error.
And I
can say trial and error like multiple times over and
lots
over.
Of error. I think that, but the more you try, the more you fail. Occasionally you'll succeed. That little success will be enough for you to continue to keep going and then build upon your success. Like all success does is create the reward for good work is just more work. It's like, oh wait, it's great. This was awesome. Here's more, and they're like, damn, I have to figure out how to balance it. But it's like it's simple. It's literally like I'm grateful to be in this position to come and for you to think that I'm interesting enough to talk about the things that we're working, but it would be nothing without, on the hashtag Lunchbag front, without the tens of thousands of people all over the world that have contributed their time in various capacities and lent their platforms to inspire other people to just do better and make their immediate surroundings better. Hilltop would be nothing without the incredible operational team that we have and the people that we have on the front line, making sure that we're leaving all of our customers better than we found them, and thinking about hospitality in its purest form. And at scale, what that could mean if you have like a sincerity of intent around creating a quality experience that other people can feel good about. And to me, the best impact is immeasurable. If you're changing people's mind about their role in the world, how the fuck do you measure that? Like that's ultimate success, and that's what kind of keeps us going. And then on the Slauson front, I mean, we have a really deep bench of dope people across, our core team, to the people that are running our programming, to the people that are operating our platform and building out our content, down to the founders that we back and the customers that they're supporting. So, I'm just grateful to be in this position to be able to, talk about it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word storytelling earlier, and I know you guys do like an annual yearbook. You just hired somebody to come in and do content, which seems like a nice to have. Like all these things seem like nice to haves. Why are they imperatives for you?
It kind of goes back to that it's the long game. I mean, part of it honestly is to hold ourselves accountable, right? Like we have this vision for the world. We don't necessarily know every step that it takes to kind of realize that vision, but the importance of documenting it. You have your mandatory things that you have to submit, like an annual report. Going a little bit beyond and making it beautiful. Doesn't, and communicating things, going above and beyond to talk about, educating people on how to think and talk about what it is that we do is kind of part of building a brand. If going back to your question, if there's one thing that I would be able to give myself credit for that I think I'm exceptional at, is like I just love creating brands and love getting people to resonate with the missions of those brands, doing it for the right reasons without compromising like the experience. So, part of that is like, part of it is like communicating what we're doing externally, and then part of it is like 10 years from now I can look back on 10 years worth of annual reports, which for us are in the form of a high school yearbook, and I can look at like, oh, I didn't know we set forth to do this. We set an intention. We didn't just speak it into existence. We worked our ass off for these things to exist in the hopes that somebody else can point to us in the event that we're massively successful financially, or however you measure success. Somebody else will care enough to go look back on the archives of what we've done. Hope people probably with way more resources than we have, and whether they give a shit about what we give a shit about or not, want to invest in the same things that we invest in because they see massive potential. And that's the way we think. We don't think that we're going to do any of this by ourselves. We just want to inspire other people to do the same thing.
With all the skills you need to flex on a given day, and actually wrote that when I wrote down the word flex in my notes, also wrote down Barack Obama and will.i.am because you posted a photo a few weeks ago. And so I'll skip my original question and go to that for a second. What was that moment, and why was it an influential moment for you?
To your point, like about a month ago, we had the opportunity to share the work that we were doing with Slauson & Co. with President Obama and Valerie Jarrett from the Obama Foundation. And, one of our really close advisors is a man named Ron Conway. He's kind of often considered, the godfather of Silicon Valley, and been doing this for decades, and is the ultimate kind of kingmaker and connector in that ecosystem, and somebody that we met early on in our journey that believed enough in us to kind of like lay the groundwork for what his sauce was and open up his network to people that to hear about what we were doing. And he was hosting a founder summit where he was going to interview President Obama as a keynote fireside chat, and he's like, you guys should come up and spend some time and learn more about the work that they're doing and share some of the things that we're doing. So, obviously you see things like that on social media. Of course, it looks cool, but for us, it was just a validation that we're kind of on the right path and, doing cool stuff that people that we admire that have changed the course of the world.
Yeah, and I don't mean it like as a flex just for the sake of flexing, right? I think at some point for the right audience, the right person who sees it, becomes inspiration and aspiration. So I think that's great. When we think about the concept of masters of craft, kind of counterintuitive because I think there is no mastery. What's a thing that you're trying to master in your life right now?
Oh man, I just want to master the two things are really just, more so on the personal front, because, I think I'm, really starting to develop the confidence around, the ability to create things that matter. Like, you do something once, you kind of feel like, it was luck. You can't do that again. And then, even if it might be something completely different, but it's like the thing that I'm on a personal level, just, I know in my heart is like the key to a lot of great things is just remembering to kind of be grateful. Not kind of be grateful, remembering to practice gratitude. And that's something that I have just not been programmed from an early age. And it's something, there's a lot of unlearning that has kind of been done of like default settings. We all have our stuff that we kind of grew up with. I think all of our parents probably try to do the best that they could, but I think that for me, it's really just a personal journey to kind of apply whether it's pain or trauma or success, and kind of pile all that up and pour it into whatever the project is.
There's a quote that I love, which is, sometimes we try hard to give our kids what we didn't have, but we forget to give them what we did have. I think I botched that, but the idea is that, there's experiences that, you like that kind of made you who you are, that you're now a parent right? And it's like you want to give them some of that grit and some of that like, listen, you got to figure it out. But you also like you've been able to be in a position where you can be a better provider than maybe you experienced. So like, how do you balance that?
That's another great question. You're really good at this.
Thank you.
You should start a podcast. I
just hit you with a soldier boy.
I'm very, again, as with most things, all my partnerships across any business or philanthropic, I mean, the most important partnership is, having an incredible wife that I met through volunteering with Hashtag Lunchbag. So when I think about
it all started with a sandwich.
Giving has given me everything that I've gotten. And I think that, through those, I think my favorite part about being a father is getting to be a kid again. Through the lens of my children, who ask the most basic rudimentary questions that I think that I have the answer to, but then as I'm explaining them, I'm like, oh, I don't think I understand this. Am I smarter than a fifth grader? No. I mean, I have to reassess it, and I have to make sure that I'm not passing along any bias or anything that's just, quite frankly, not right or didn't necessarily age well, and I get to reframe it for myself. And, I think for me, a lot of the work that I've done on the personal front, I think therapy was kind of my gateway to kind of healing. My toolbox has filled up with a lot of, things like meditation, things where we spend a lot of time. And, I think we've been reconnecting mostly randomly running into each other at the yoga studio. Mm-hmm. But, I think it's, I forgot what the question was, and I feel like now I'm just
you answered it, which is great.
Great.
I mean, also, Caleb's toe is tapping. Caleb has been tapping his foot. Yeah. Where'd he go? Oh, he had a nervous tick.
He knows that this is the last episode of the day, and he's like ready to get out of here.
Where'd you go?
I don't know. Well,
he must have gone to the bathroom.
Well, he's gone because he's not tapping it.
He missed his opportunity. Yep. He had the best idea to pitch you. It was like $60 million worth of. He missed his opportunity.
Yeah, it's all good.
No, I think this is great, man. I appreciate you coming by and like also being vulnerable. I think that is a trait. I think as men we don't see it, especially as like as men of color and as men of color who are looked up to for certain qualities and traits and like things that we aspire to actually live out in real life. Even though, despite
I mean, on that note, though, and again, thank you for the platform. I think the thing that I've learned through all of this, it's gotten like as hard as it is to be vulnerable in the beginning. The most beautiful interactions come when you're just kind of talk about the real shit, and like the best friendships that I've formulated in my adult life, the relationship that I built with my children when I know that I'm wrong, the tough conversations that you have, as I've been married. The best shit comes out of being vulnerable. And I think that that's ultimately like if more and more people feel, and like vulnerability evokes more vulnerability. And if more people are willing to be selectively vulnerable in certain settings, then we'd be surprised at what comes.
I mean, my hemorrhoids are killing me right now. Is that too vulnerable?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if vulnerable is like, not necessarily anything I could relate to or help you with.
You don't have one of you? Don't you have like a clinical startup? Or one of your startups
good luck with your hemorrhoids.
People start clinical. This is a real thing. I studied up.
Yeah. It's just one of those podcasts where you have like clips of stuff, and then you have like a floating.
There will be no polyps on screen. So everybody's
kill my vulnerability moment.
I think levity is also important.
Yeah, it's fine.
I didn't mean to. You feel slighted?
I'm here for the banter.
Where can we follow up? How can we support?
You can support. You can check out more about Slauson & Co. at slauson.co. You can learn more about Hilltop at findyourhilltop.com or at findyourhilltop. And then #lunchbag.org if you want to find ways to give back. And I'm just AJ Fresh.
AJ Fresh. Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you.